Did you ever put together a 1,000-piece puzzle? Did you know the picture that you were supposed to make? Well, try to imagine putting together a 1,000-piece puzzle without knowing what the final picture was. When I was a kid, they had a mystery booklet, and in order to get the answer, to solve the mystery, you had to put together this puzzle. And they did not tell you what the picture was. I think the way Hashem, the way God created this world, so many things happen, so many details happen in our lives, in the lives of those around us, and in the world. And it's so hard to know why those things happen and how they fit into the puzzle. But there's no question that every single one of us has a piece of the puzzle and a pivotal role to play in this world. Today, I invite you to enjoy the stories of 4 individuals from our community, people that have experienced some remarkable things. Please join me in hearing their story.
Hi, I'm Jay Balter. I live in Leisure Village with my wife for 57 years. I have 2 children, 6 grandchildren. Okay? I've lived the great American life. Okay? I was born in Crown Heights, in what was a Jewish community, mostly Orthodox Jews. We didn't know anything else except Orthodox Jews. I was a secular Orthodox Jew, which means that I didn't go to temple, I didn't pray, but I ate a lot of Chinese food. But you know, the thinking was still Orthodox in many ways. So, and I was there when, much to our surprise, we started to seeing a lot of people come from Europe from the Holocaust. A lot of people coming from Europe with looking different than I was a 2nd generation American. My parents were born here, looking different than us, and we didn't understand them completely. Okay? So it was different time in history. But I used to walk up to Lincoln Terrace Park and Eastern Parkway and pass by the rabbi's house, and he used to give out dollar bills. I didn't know who he was. Okay? So it wasn't until much later on in life when I came to California, and actually Agora, when I started to learn about Chabad and Hasidism. I didn't know about it in New York at all. I just was there when it started. So I was like there when the history began in America. And when I came to Agora, I learned more about Chabad. Okay? So I read some things over the years, and I continued. I'm in the field of psychology, and in the field of humanistic psychology and spiritual psychology and transformational psychology. And I was given a book one day, Heaven Comes Down to Earth, and I read both segments, and these were quotes and philosophies, which about follows. Words of wisdom from the Rebbe, and I found it was consistent with many secular thoughts. So I didn't feel foreign to Chabad totally. And while I'm not a true follower, I am a true supporter, because I think that they do good work. They provide a humanistic touch to Judaism because of their loving and their caring. Okay, so that's my history. In addition to that, I have a little bit of other history, which is significant. Being a young Jew in Brooklyn, I was there when, after World War II, and we always questioned, and most of my relatives were soldiers during World War II. I had 7 uncles on my mother's side and 7 on my brother's side. It's a good Jewish family, okay? And everybody was in the army. And my brother was in the army, all my cousins were in the army, all my uncles were in the army, and they fought in World War II, and they fought in Korea. So I was, basically expected to, go and serve my country, which I did, and I joined when I was 18, okay? And went into the 1st Infantry in Fort Benning, where I was trained as an infantryman, but they decided that Apparently, I didn't have the ability to fire a weapon. Okay? And my ability to fire, they decided in order to have the will to kill. Okay? So found out, the Army found that out early in my life, and they said, would I like to be a medic? So I said, sure. So I went to Army Medical School. They put me with a bunch of conscientious objectives. So now I was a little Jewish guy from Brooklyn, and I was in a room with 39 Seventh-day Adventists and one Jew, and we were studying medicine, and I was learning about how to be a conscientious objector. So I found out that even within the Christian community, there are things similar to the Jewish community. So there were things that were compatible that I was able to discuss, and we had a good time. And then the Army decides to send me to Germany. Wow. I said, that's a great place to go. It's peacetime. I said, I might as well go to Germany. I said, so where do they send me? They send me to Nuremberg, Germany. Okay? And not only do they send me to Nuremberg, Germany, they tell me my living quarters is going to be a place called the SS Kaserne. That's the Stormtroopers Barracks in Nuremberg, okay? Which today is a tourist attraction for cruise ships and all these little things on the river. They go to Nuremberg, they go to my barracks, right? And to the fields where Hitler, every time he conquered a city, he built another pillar. And that's where his rally fields were. And here's my room in Nuremberg, and I'm living in a dead SS colonel's room, okay? Dead SS colonel's room for 3 years, okay? And I'm overlooking the fields where Hitler, okay, had his rally fields. So I'm in the middle of history every night, okay? So I get there to Germany, and I say, "Ooh, what am I going to do here?" I said, I'm a medic. I'm supposed to take care of people, and also we're occupying force. We have to be kind to the people we have to be kind to the Germans because we won the war. So now it's the time to rebuild the country. So I'm in conflict, of course, as a Jewish guy, what I'm doing. So anyway, I communicated with some rabbi back east, and he was convinced, okay, I won't mention his name, he was convinced that I was sent to Nuremberg for a purpose, for a greater purpose. And one of my purposes was to remember the Nuremberg trials were held after the war. There were only about 6 or 7 people convicted, okay? Most were not convicted because the defense was, I will follow orders. I will follow orders. I followed orders. I just followed orders. So anyway, this rabbi said to me, hey, your job is go find these guys. Okay? You're in Nuremberg. I said, there's people in Nuremberg that know what's going on. Go find some Nazi and take care of them. So anyway, I said, whoa, boy. I said, do I have a greater purpose here than just being a nice soldier for the American Army and keeping peace? So then one night I got drunk, because you get drunk in the Army, you go out and have a drink and have a beer and so forth. I come back, who comes to my house? The Israeli Army comes to my room. 2 Jewish guys are leaving. They're going to be, the Israeli needed, it was right after the war, the Yom Kippur War. They had war with Egypt. They needed soldiers to train me. Okay, so one night I didn't even tell the story in the book. I never talked. So I said, I'm not going to go. I am not going to give up. But 2 guys went. I remember guys went at the time. So instead, I chased Nazis. Okay. So anyway, rather than go into the whole tale, I said I wrote a little book about it. Okay? So what does it say? I slipped in Hitler's bed. So I wrote this book recently. I'm already 90 years old. I just wrote a book. But I felt it was a good story to tell in these times. Okay. There was a time when I really wanted to assassinate somebody who was not convicted at Nuremberg. And I did find somebody. Okay? And I did plot to assassinate him. And I was being supported by the rabbi back in New York who felt that was my job. So I didn't do it, of course. Okay? But I think if you want to read the book, you'll find out what goes on. And it also is a story not just of what happened in Nuremberg, but I came from a less religious, more confusing family, which may have been helped if they were more religious, or more less secular. But in my case, it wasn't. So the book also tells the tale of a Jewish kid, who happens to be, coming from a different type of family and has a different lifestyle and goes into this thing. Okay, and there I am. So that's my story. I think that it has some value. It shows how we have to deal with our anger and our feeling of vengeance and what we do and how we have to change those feelings. But I had to go through it in a situation where I was in a position to actually carry out an act of vengeance. And I decided not to. Okay? But I think the process of deciding not to in those days was very difficult. So read the book if you want to. It's on Amazon. Anybody who buys the book, all proceeds, including any profits, goes to Chabad of Camarillo, okay, for the continuing education programs. Okay, that's my story.
Thank you, Jay. Your story is remarkable, and anybody who really wants to get to know the entire story, I encourage you to go on Amazon. And as Jay graciously told us, the proceeds of the sale of his book will go to support Chabad of Camarillo. Have you ever met a quiet person? Somebody that you thought, oh, maybe they're an ordinary person, have led an ordinary life. And then you find out that this person has done some extraordinary things. I would say Richard Milgram is one of those people. When you meet Richard, he's quiet, thoughtful. Well, wait till you hear what he has accomplished and how many lives he has changed for the better. Without further ado, I invite Richard Milgram to share his talk, Generally, I Tried.
Hi, my name is Richard Milgram, and I want to thank Chabad for the opportunity, Chabad of Camarillo, for the opportunity to be here and to speak. Everyone that I've spoken with over the past year that I've lived in Camarillo, I've found interesting. I've made a lot of friends, and I really appreciate that opportunity. What have I been doing with my time in retirement? Because it's 1 year of retirement for me. I've done volunteer work at Chabad. I appreciate that. Under Rabbi Yosef's auspices, I believe is the correct term, I've been able to visit the sick. I've volunteered for docent training at the Ronald Reagan Library, and that's been a hectic, interesting time. I volunteered for, I believe it's Smile on Seniors, the Camarillo Air Show a year ago. Enjoyed that. And I enjoyed so much in my studies here and the classes and so forth, and also studying with Isser Charter privately, learning Hebrew. So I've tried to use my time constructively, and I appreciate that opportunity. I want to tell you just a little bit about what I've done in terms of religion. I grew up in North Carolina, in the town of Fayetteville. There were at that time about 100 families, and my father and mom bought a home within view of the synagogue. So many an evening we were called at the last minute to for yard site, for minions. We'd rush over, away from the TV, sometimes away from our meal, but that's how I grew up, and it was a great experience. I remember, this is many years ago, the rabbi at that time inviting me to tour with him to the neighboring communities and speak and lead the congregation in Anim Zemirot. That was my big hit. So that was a great experience. I graduated from high school in North Carolina and attended East Carolina University for a couple of years, and then moved to Boston, where I attended Berklee College of Music in conjunction with Boston Conservatory of Music, majoring not just in performing on an instrument, but learning music education techniques, in other words, how to teach. And that's really what I've done my entire life from the age of 21 to, I'm not going to tell you, but anyway. And my music training basically was private lessons, attending these colleges that I've just talked about. And when I was on the faculty of a college in Massachusetts, Merrimack College, I got to know the rabbi who was also on their faculty, and was invited to speak I don't remember the exact title, but it was a Jewish music program. And we performed, and I spoke about Jewish music. It was a wonderful experience many decades ago. Taught for 5 years in public schools in music education training, conducting bands and orchestras and private lessons and marching bands and music theory classes. Just tremendous range of experience over the years. And then my performing experience was really interesting because I'm stepping back a few years. I would go into a music lesson, a private music lesson with my instructor. He would hand me a piece of paper with a phone number. But before that, he'd say, "Are you working?" Meaning, are you playing in a band Saturday night? No, I'm not. Well, go across the street, go to the phone booth. Remember the phone booths? And make a phone call to a booking agency, which resulted in, over the years, my performing for Ed Sullivan, Jerry Vale, Bobby Vinton, Peaches and Herb. Maybe you've never heard of them, but that was at the Sugar Shack in Boston. The others were at Boston Garden, the other performances. And also, once I moved to Connecticut, a few years later, had my own orchestra performing for Ginger Rogers and for Phyllis Diller. So these were great experience. This is all interspersed with the Friday and Saturday night dance jobs, as we call it. I've had so many experiences. I remember Ron, who wanted to attend college. So he told me I applied to Yale, and they asked me about my music background and my overall education, how well-rounded I am, and would you write a letter? So I wrote a letter for Ron, and he said, "I got a scholarship to Yale, 4-year scholarship. Would you write another letter emphasizing blah, blah, blah?" And he got even more benefits from Yale. So this is the kind of thing that my era or my style of teaching that meant so much to me. Then I'd have students coming in saying, "I want to excel. I want to be in the all-state band or orchestra or chorus." And I'd work with them, and 9 times out of 10, maybe it was higher than that, they would excel and they'd get in. And what also I should talk about is that my late wife, who passed away 2.5 years ago, Judith, was the director of the Shoreline School of Art and Music and co-founder along with me. And we were approved by the Connecticut State Department of Education, the Connecticut State Department of Higher Education, for teacher training and for career training in the arts. This was a job, in effect, that we had for 41 years until I closed the school 1 year ago, the end of May. And it was all people from all walks of life in 35 different towns over the years would come to us for that kind of training or what they wanted specifically. So it was a great experience, and I may be not going to the exact point that I'm trying to bring out, but what I'm saying is that the education and what I involved myself in teaching was to bring out the best from the student, and each person, radically different. I really enjoyed that challenge. That's what made teaching so important and so rewarding for me. And going into the supermarket and seeing a student from years ago saying, "Are you still playing? Yes, I am." And knowing that I'd given them their introduction to lessons. And I remember the last month that the school was in operation, a student, the mother called up and said, "I want to thank you so much. Michelle has now been accepted as a music major to college, and it all started at the Shoreline School of Art and Music." That's what I did for 41 years, and before that, as I've talked about, college and public school, but that's the gratifying aspect, and as well as the performing. And I appreciate the opportunity to address you and to tell you about this wonderful life.
Harvey Brosler is somebody that I've gotten to know over the last many years here in Camarillo. He is somebody that puts others first. He is somebody that, despite his own challenges, makes it his business to reach out and transform the world around him and do good for others. His talk, entitled A Success Story, really sums up the true definition of success. Many think in terms of how much money they have, or how many cars or homes that they own. But really, true success is measured by how much good you have done in this world. And Harvey has had a lifetime of success. Sit back, relax, and enjoy a success story.
The title of my story is A Success Story. While attending law school at night, I worked as a social worker for the Baltimore City Welfare Department in AFDC, which means Aid to Families with Dependent Children. Most of the families involved single women with children. I may have had a caseload of over 200 families, and most times I would see a family once a year. When a family started receiving assistance, I would try and see them as soon as possible so I could assess their needs. I remember one family very well. They lived on the second floor of a 3-floor apartment house. When I first arrived, the stairwell and landing were dark. I knocked on the door and heard a small voice asking me to come in. I followed the voice to the bedroom and saw a very thin lady in the bed. She mentioned she was not feeling well and was taking oil of vinegar to get better. Oil of wintergreen to get better. I advised her that she should see a doctor as soon as possible and that I would come back the next week. She told me that the reason there was no lighting was because the wiring was defective, which was subsequently fixed. When I came back, she advised me that she had seen the doctor and he determined her blood pressure was 80/0. Since a normal blood pressure is generally 120/80, that meant that her blood pressure was so low the doctor could not get a diastolic reading. The doctor advised her that if she had not come to see him, she would have been dead within 2 days. I started working diligently with my client as it was obvious that she needed help. Contrary to my usual routine, I saw her 1 day a week for the next 2 months. I provided her with supplemental funds to buy mattresses to replace the urine-stained mattresses that her children were sleeping on and to replace their bedroom furniture. I requested that the department's housekeeping service visit her and provide advice on making nutritious meals, in shopping, and keeping the house clean. On one of my visits, we were sitting in her kitchen when all of a sudden I noticed that the wall behind the stove was moving. Cockroaches were coming out of the wall in droves. I advised my client to go to the store and get a sprayer and roach killer. When she brought back the supplies back, I started spraying the wall, and out came more and more roaches. She swept up the dead roaches in a dustpan. I called the landlord and advised him that I was going to contact the health department. He told me that he would do whatever I wanted, as he did not want any trouble. My client's brother was visiting her, and he advised me that if the landlord supplied the paint and painting supplies, he would paint the apartment. The landlord agreed. The apartment was painted. On one of my final visits, I noticed a string of wires running from the first to the second floor. My client advised me that the electricity was out again, that the only way she got a light was by running a connection from the first floor apartment. She had contacted the landlord and was after him to get the wiring fixed. She advised me, my apartment looks nice and I want to keep it that way. A success story. The title of this story is How My Family Influenced Me in What I Am Today. The most important things we learn until the age of 10 that are very basic to our whole life comes primarily from our parents. I have always felt very lucky in that respect, as my father and mother were very honest in their dealings with others, had a good name, and always fulfilled their obligations. I learned their work ethic and that a person's word is their bond. You cannot buy a good name. They always had the respect of members of the family, the salespersons that came to my parents' neighborhood hardware store, and the customers who patronized the store. My parents opened the hardware store in 1933 during the Depression and utilized all of their finances to buy inventory from a bankruptcy sale and to fix up the store. It had to be tough. In 1941, the United States officially entered the Second World War. Although pots and pans and other products made of materials needed for the war effort were hard to get, my father was always given first choice on those items that the salesman had due to the way he treated them when their products were easier to obtain. I remember vividly a situation that happened when I was maybe 5 or 6 that made a deep impression on me. Bridgeport, Connecticut had a terrible storm that brought down telephone poles and caused widespread flooding. My dad and I were able to get to drive through all of that to open the store. He advised me to get all of the flashlights, batteries, and candles we had in stock and place them on the main counter. I mentioned to my dad that maybe we should charge a little higher price for the candles as people were in need. He advised me that we would charge the normal price, as after the emergency was over, customers would remember that we took advantage of them. I am sure that if my father was alive, he would not remember that incident, but his words had a big influence on me. When I was growing up, I felt safe and that things around me were always under control. I remember looking up to my father when I was maybe 5 or so, knowing that if there were any major family decisions to be made, I could depend upon him to make the right decision. Now that I'm the oldest generation, my children look to me to make the right decisions as I looked to my father to make. I remember a situation when my children looked to me to decide what to do. I remember that look as I had the same look when I would silently look to my father. I wished he was there to make the right decision. Sometimes I wish I was back being 5 or 6 again and having my father make the decisions. He was my security blanket, and now I am the security blanket for my children, which is not easy. All we can say is that we make the right decisions on important matters. I think about them often and what they meant to me.
Thank you, Harvey. You are truly a remarkable person. Every single one of us was affected by the Holocaust, was affected by World War II. Whether you're a Jew, whether you're American, whether you're an American Jew. But unfortunately, as time goes along, there are less and less people to tell us about those experiences that were there. Now, although Harvey Krasner was not in the concentration camps, thank God, during the war, he was in Dachau 3 days after it was liberated. Harvey fought in the Battle of the Bulge. And I think what makes Harvey unique, even amongst the Jewish war veterans, is that when the war was over, Harvey continued to serve. And he spent over 70 years and continues to raise money to support these unsung heroes. Ladies and gentlemen, with honor and respect, I call upon Harvey Krasner to share with us his talk, A Lifetime of Service.
And maybe a little before. I'm 95 years old, and I was born in New York City, moved to California when I was 11 years old, and went all through school there. And when I graduated high school in June of 1942, and I turned 18 a couple of months later. And in 1942, we had been attacked a few months earlier by Japan and Germany, and when I turned 18, at the end of 1942, all my friends were going into the service. Almost everyone was doing something for the war effort, World War II. So I volunteered. I tried to get into the Air Corps, and my vision wasn't so good. So a couple of months later, I was drafted, went into the Army, and I took my basic training at Fort Custer, Michigan, and that after basic training, they gave everyone a very comprehensive, I guess, sort of an intelligence test. And if you had done some college and were ROTC and you passed high, they sent you to officer candidate school. But I passed pretty high, but I was only 18 years old, so I was sent to. Went into a program at that time called ASTP, Army Specialized Training Program. That was for people who passed high, but were not old enough to go to officer candidate school. So they sent me. I went to the University of Pennsylvania for a few months, and unfortunately, that program was disbanded. ASTP was disbanded. So I went to advanced back into the regular Army, and I went into another training program in 1943, and I went overseas. Eventually, I went overseas in August of 1944, and I was a replacement in southern France, and I was a replacement in the tank battalion, 756 Tank Battalion, which was attached to support of the 3rd Infantry Division, and at that time was fighting in southern France. So I was in southern France. We landed in southern France, and then we that was in August of 44, and slowly we went through France, and then we ended up in eastern France, and we got involved in the official name, the Ardennes, which was an official name for the Bulge, Battle of the Bulge. I was in the Battle of the Bulge, and for until about February of 1945, when that was over, and then we went. We crossed the Rhine and went into the Rhineland, and crossed into Germany, and went through southern Germany, went through and captured Nuremberg and some of those southern cities, Augsburg, Nuremberg, Würzburg, Munich, and we went to Dachau. We were at Dachau, which was near Munich, about 3 days after the liberation. We didn't liberate it, but we were there 3 days after it was liberated, and it was a terrible, terrible thing to see. There was thousands of people lying around dying, and they were still in the same situation they were before they were liberated. Nothing had been changed. And then I ended up, my tank battalion and division were the first troops overrunning Hitler's eagle nest in Berchtesgaden. We were the first troops into Berchtesgaden, which was Hitler's eagle's nest headquarters in southern Germany. When the war ended a couple of weeks after that, on May 8th, we were in Salzburg, Austria, and that's where my tank battalion ended up. And we stayed there and did occupation duties and in the Army of Occupation. And then I was discharged, went home the end of 1945, and went to school at, by this time in 1945 I was 20 years old. When I was 18, 20, and I was turning 21, I went to school on a GI Bill, and went to UCLA on a GI Bill, and I finished school in 1948, and I became, I got married in 1952, and very soon after that I joined, this is a really important part of, after my military Army career, I joined the Jewish War Veterans of the USA. Not many people know a lot about the Jewish War Veterans. It's the oldest veterans organization in America. Founded in 1896. And the reason it was founded was because it was to dispel any anti-Semitic rumors that the Jews did not fight in the Civil War. So some Jewish veterans of the Civil War got together to prove and to show everyone that they fought in the Civil War as much as anybody else. And there were veterans from the Union side and veterans from the Confederate side. They formed the Jewish War Veterans of the USA in 1896 to prove that they fought as much as anyone else in the Civil War. And one of the things that I've been pretty proud of my time in the Jewish War Veterans. I've been a member for 70 years, since I'm 25 years old. And one of our, that's one of our efforts, that we make sure everyone understands that the Jews fought in all the wars that the United States got involved in, from the French and Indian War to the Revolutionary War, the War of 1812, the Mexican War, even in the Indian wars. Some Jews always were in the military and represented themselves very well. I know more about the World War II, and I'll tell you a little bit about the Jews involved in World War II. The Jewish population in the United States at the time was 2% of the population of the United States in 1941. Yet we were 5% of the military, 5% of the military, and the Jews were 10% of the officer corps. Why was that possible? Because the Jews' penchant for education and college degrees made them more acceptable to be officers. So we were 10% of the officer corps, yet we were only 2% of the population, and we were 5% of the military, but 10% of the officer corps. I just want to make sure that people understand that's one of the things that the Jewish war veterans, we want to make sure that everyone understands that we participated in the military very strongly. Another thing that the Jewish war veterans does, we have a poppy program. We solicit donations on Memorial Day week and Veterans Day week for donations for a poppy, and the poppy indicates that if you wear the poppy, indicates that you donated, and all the money that we collect go to help hospitalized and homeless veterans, not only Jews, all veterans benefit from this. We call it the Poppy program. We've been doing this. I've been doing this for the Poppy program. I've been a Jewish war veteran for 70 years, but I've been doing the Poppy program for 60 years. At different posts, wherever I lived, I was a member of the post in that area. A post is a name for the Jewish war veterans in that area, and for different posts. And I've been doing it for 60 years, Memorial Day week and Veterans Day week. And I personally have raised about $250,000 to help homeless and hospitalized veterans. I don't know what else to tell you. That's pretty much the story of, well, up till now. I'm still doing it here in Camarillo. I do it at the Vons Market. I sit in front of the Vons Market, not this Memorial Day because of the virus problem, but I still do it, and I'm going to continue to do it as long as I can.
Thank you, Harvey. I would like to encourage you to share your story. Make a difference to your family, to your friends, to your neighbor, to your community. And in this way, each one of us will bring our light to the world and make it a better place. Thank you for joining us.